Imagine having all the money in the world, yet lying in bed, uncertain if the people closest to you truly love you or only love what you provide. What if one day, you pretended to be weak, fragile, and on the edge of losing it all, just to see who would remain by your side? Friends, this is the story of a man who did exactly that, and what he discovered about his family changed his life forever. Stay with me till the end, because you will not only be touched, but you'll also carry a powerful lesson about love, loyalty, and kindness. And before we dive in, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heart-touching stories that remind us of what truly matters in life. Jonathan Miles had built his empire from nothing. As a young man, he had struggled in the crowded streets of New York, working odd jobs, sleeping in tiny rented rooms, and sacrificing sleep for ambition. Over decades, his relentless drive, sharp mind, and bold decisions in real estate had made him one of the city's most successful millionaires. With a sprawling mansion, expensive cars, and a lifestyle envied by many, Jonathan seemed to have everything. But behind the glimmering surface, he carried a growing emptiness, one that wealth could not fill. His wife had passed away years ago, leaving him with 2 children, Henry and Rebecca, and an extended family who often surrounded him, not out of genuine affection, but because of his fortune. At least, that's what he feared. The thought haunted him often: do they love me, or do they just love my money? He noticed the little things, how his calls went unanswered when no favors were needed, how gatherings turned cheerful only when he opened his wallet, how gifts and expensive dinners seemed to buy their presence. His heart longed for sincerity, but he doubted its existence around him. And so, an idea was born. An idea risky yet necessary for his peace of mind. Jonathan would stage a test, one that no amount of wealth could control. He would pretend to be gravely sick, confined to his bed, frail and helpless. In that state, he would see who came forward with true love and care, and who disappeared when the money seemed uncertain. When he announced to his family that the doctors had found something severe, an illness that would weaken him for months, reactions varied. Henry, his eldest, quickly asked what would happen to the family business if Jonathan could no longer manage. Rebecca shed a few tears but quickly distracted herself with her friend's weekend plans. His brother-in-law muttered false sympathies but slyly asked about the future of the mansion. Jonathan, listening quietly, felt his heart sink deeper. But he remained firm in his plan. He lay in bed, letting his staff spread whispers of his worsening condition, while he observed silently, waiting to see who would truly care. Days turned into weeks. His children visited occasionally, bringing expensive flowers or pre-packaged meals, but their eyes were always on their phones or schedules. They stayed just long enough to be noticed, never long enough to bring comfort. The mansion, once buzzing with family dinners, grew emptier with each passing day. And yet, Jonathan did not feel entirely abandoned, for one person had stayed by his side without fail. It was Clara, a young woman who had worked as a maid in his house for 5 years. She had no riches, no stake in his empire, no inheritance to hope for. And yet, when Jonathan pretended to be weak, she was the one adjusting his pillows, preparing his soup, reading to him at night, and speaking words of encouragement when silence weighed heavy. "Sir," she often said gently, "health is more precious than gold. Don't lose hope. You'll get stronger." Her kindness carried no agenda, no hidden motives. It was sincere. Jonathan, while feigning frailty, felt an ache of gratitude swell inside him. Clara reminded him of the values he once held close: compassion, humility, and simple care. But he wanted to give his family more time. Maybe they would change, maybe they only needed the shock of seeing him weakened. So he waited, watching. But instead of change, what he witnessed broke him further. Henry quietly began arranging meetings with lawyers, asking about transferring business control. Rebecca complained to her friends that taking care of her father was too depressing. Extended relatives hardly visited at all. Jonathan had wanted to test his family's hearts, but the results were harsher than he expected. His riches had surrounded him with opportunists, while true love came only from a woman who earned minimum wages under his roof. Lying in bed, Jonathan began to realize that life had given him everything except what mattered most, family who cared not for his wealth but for his well-being. As he closed his eyes one evening, listening to Clara hum softly while folding his blankets, Jonathan knew one thing for certain: this test would change everything. He could no longer live surrounded by masks. His heart demanded a reckoning, and the days ahead would reveal it. Weeks passed, and Jonathan's act of illness reached its climax. The mansion felt emptier, his loneliness deeper, and yet Clara's presence grew brighter, like a candle refusing to die out in the darkness. She not only took care of his meals and medicines but also shared little stories of her childhood, the values her mother taught her about kindness, and her belief that true wealth was measured not by what you had but by how much love you gave. These words, spoken without expectation, touched Jonathan more than any business victory ever had. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not as a millionaire, not as a provider, but simply as a man in need of care. Meanwhile, Henry and Rebecca grew impatient. Henry pressured Jonathan's lawyer, asking if his father had updated the will. Rebecca argued with the staff about why so much money was being spent on medical needs when it could be used for her lifestyle. Their true selves, unmasked by Jonathan's experiment, revealed hearts hardened by greed. The pain of betrayal cut deep, but Jonathan held back his anger. He wanted them to learn a lesson, not through confrontation, but through the consequences of their own choices. One morning, Jonathan decided it was time. He called the entire family to his mansion, saying he had important news. They arrived, half concerned, half curious, already whispering about the possible inheritance. Jonathan, still lying in bed, looked at each of them with tired eyes. "I've been reflecting," he said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of weeks of silence, "and I've learned who truly cares when there is nothing left to give." His words unsettled them. Henry shifted uneasily, Rebecca tried to fake concern, and the relatives forced awkward smiles. But Jonathan's eyes softened as he looked at Clara, who stood quietly in the corner. "This woman," he said, pointing gently, "has shown me more love, patience, and care than all of you combined. When you disappeared, she stayed. When you asked about money, she asked about my health. When you turned your backs, she held my hand." The room froze. Clara's eyes widened in shock, shaking her head. "Sir, I only did what was right." "Please don't," but Jonathan raised a hand kindly. "Clara, kindness like yours is rare. And it deserves to be honored." With a deep breath, Jonathan sat up straighter, revealing a strength his family had not seen in weeks. Gasps echoed across the room. "The truth," he continued firmly, "is that I have not been sick. This was a test to see who truly cared for me as a person and not for my money. And I have seen enough." Silence blanketed the mansion. Henry's face turned pale, Rebecca's lips trembled, and the relatives looked as though the ground beneath them had cracked. Jonathan's next words fell like thunder: "I will not leave my empire in the hands of those who cannot love me without wealth. From this day forward, my businesses will be placed in charitable trusts, and Clara will be given stewardship alongside professionals I trust. She has proven a heart that puts people above riches, and that is the legacy I want to leave behind." The shock was unbearable for Henry and Rebecca. They protested, argued, even begged, but Jonathan remained calm. "You had your chance to show love when I needed it most. You chose greed. That was your decision. This is mine." His voice was not bitter, only resolute. Clara, overwhelmed with tears, pleaded, "Sir, I never wanted anything in return. Please don't do this for me." But Jonathan smiled gently. "Clara, you taught me the greatest truth, that kindness is the wealth we carry to our last breath. I am not rewarding you, I am entrusting you. Because I know you will honor this wealth by using it to serve others." And so it was. Jonathan restructured his empire, turning much of it into foundations for the poor, hospitals for the sick, and schools for the needy. Clara became the guiding light of those projects, not for power, but because her heart was pure. Henry and Rebecca, left with smaller inheritances, eventually realized the emptiness of greed and the consequences of neglecting love. Jonathan, though saddened by their choices, felt peace for the first time in years. He had found family not by blood, but by kindness. As Jonathan grew older, he often sat by the gardens of his mansion, no longer lonely, surrounded by the laughter of children from the schools his fortune now supported, and by Clara's unwavering presence. He would smile, knowing he had finally understood the meaning of true wealth. And friends, this is where the story ends. With a reminder that love without expectation is the richest treasure one can find. So, if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that celebrate kindness, love, and the truths that money can never buy.